So I will be reacting to a debate right now between someone called Radio One and a woman called Weibo. This was an interesting debate that I saw a long time ago, and the name that was written for it was a phrase that I will not repeat, but we will talk about it later. This debate was one of the first that showed me that if you are on the side of pro Black Egypt, you have to come with all the information, while people who did not agree with it would challenge it simply by instinct alone. And you would see them very, very sure of themselves without knowing the majority of the information. This is what made me realize that a lot of these people are not going off of science or anything like that to justify their ideas, but in real life, they're going off of the idea that it is impossible for a Black population to create something like Egypt. And in fact, they have an allergy or even an allergic reaction to the idea.
Much better.
Much better, yeah.
Much better.
All right. So when you're
Okay.
saying that there is a whitewash of history, and particularly in Egypt, what are you referring to?
Yeah, I'm talking about the lies that are being told. Okay, now we know. Okay, now I'm not saying that. Okay, the ancient Egyptians had this one look. Okay, now we know that they were, according to their tomb images, they were many different colors. Okay, but when you go to the tomb of Seti I, okay, he shows an image where he shows 4 races of mankind.
So before he continues, I want to state that when he says the tomb of City One, he's talking about this image right here, and he's describing the 4 races as the people in this image. But we must remember that the other people have never even seen these images, and they will demonstrate that slowly through this debate.
Okay, he shows the jet black Nubians. Okay, he shows the Nubians who are jet black. He shows the ancient Egyptians who are dark reddish brown. He shows the Asiatics or the Semites who are light brown. He shows the Timahu or the Tamahu, which was the people that dwelt west of Egypt. They are shown as beige, or what I say white, for fair skin. Okay, these are the 4 classifications of the races of mankind in Egypt. Now, so when I hear people say that the ancient Egyptians were this white, Aryan, Caucasian race, and they all, and you have something, there are so many different theories concerning the race of the ancient Egyptians. Okay, so many theories, and I'm saying that all of them are wrong. They are all wrong. Some people say that they came from the Mediterranean. Some people say that they came from India. I mean, so many different theories. Okay, and none of these theories are never debated against each other. They always debated against the truth. Okay, which is the ancient Egyptians were Africans. Okay.
So as someone who has been studying Egypt for a long time, this person, his name is Radio One, by the way, is aware of several other groups, and I'm aware of them too, but I try not to challenge them too much because it's like whatever. But there are people who literally say that the ancient Egyptians were Indians, which is one of the reasons why they like to pull the similarities between the 2 areas. I like to talk about the trade between the 2 areas because I do not want to validate this idea that they were from India. That's silly. They like to say they're from the Middle East. That's the most common one. They like to say they're from Europe. They like to say they're from Madagascar. They can pick any place in the world, anywhere but Africa. But we all know they come from the native stock of Africa. And even if you believe that there were mass migration into Africa by the Middle East or some other race, there always has to be some race that was there first. It was not a dust bowl with nobody in there.
Now, okay, so to make a long story short, okay, this image from the tomb of Seti I, okay, it's pretty much telling us that the ancient Egyptians, although there may have been some that were light skinned, and there may have been some that was very dark skinned, jet black, but the majority were of dark reddish brown complexion or mahogany complexion. Okay, and some people may say, well, this is symbolic. Okay, when they show the women on the tombs as yellow and the man is red, and some people say that is symbolic, but at the same time, there are people in Africa who have that complexion.
So the part of the argument that I believe is that the people who are yellower of the women, it's symbolic a little bit. But I want to go a little deeper this time when I talk about this because we've all heard of this talking point before. So obviously I believe that it's partly symbolic, but look how the man is slightly red, but he's not like super black or anything like that. He's a slight red, and the woman is a slight yellow. But let's go back and look at African weddings to show you how Africans look like. And it's also ceremonial because women wear makeup at weddings and stuff like that. Men less, obviously, they might wear a little bit, but they're not going to wear a lot. So there's usually a variety or a variation between the men and the women. Women tend to be lighter than men on average. This is both due to sexual selection and also due to just the nature of men. Men, of course, tend to be more physically active in certain ways or more in the sun than females are, and women tend to care more about adornment and stuff like this. This is just a fact. And then, of course, you take the reality that when preparing for a wedding, a woman is probably going to be way more taken care of, blah, blah, blah. But you can see that there's a variety between there's a difference between the man and the woman in terms of skin color, though they belong to the same race. To give another example, this is from Ethiopia, and you can see here that the man is a little bit darker than that of the woman. Now, I want to stress this that I'm only showing these because it is a respectable theory, a respectable idea that people in some parts are going to be, well, women are going to be more light skinned than their male people. Now, this might not be true for every area because in some parts people are mixed, but generally in populations where there is a group of people who belong to the same race and have the same percentage of African DNA, then you will see this variation happening instantly and almost always. So let's give another example. This is a Nigerian example. And of course, this is also with the aid of makeup, but you can see from her shoulders and arms that her skin color is generally lighter than that of her husband. Now, you can imagine that living in Egypt, there would be this slight variation. See, the difference between this type of variation and the variation where they say the person is olive skin or something, like they describe them like a white person who is has gone tan, is because it will take a cancerous level of sunlight to make someone who is that pale turn that dark. But this woman could be this dark in no time. But again, you can see that women generally will be much lighter skin than their husband. And this is not, as I say, for one place or another. This is just generally in Africa and around the world. This is a truth that people have seen. So for the Egyptians, it's possible that the yellow skin was to show this slight variation. And this is to remind you that ancient Egyptians were making things up as they went. That's one thing that we actually don't appreciate, which is they might be exaggerating the color difference because they notice them themselves, and so they start to exaggerate. Just like how let's pick another thing in our 21st century. So men tend to have short hair and women tend to have long hair, and people start to exaggerate that. And even if a guy has long hair, they might shorten the person's hair because of the reality. So, in other words, if I said, draw me a picture of a god, because of the biases of our culture, you might draw the god with short hair. Then I say, draw me a image of a goddess, and you might draw her with long hair. And as you can see here in this image right here, if the ancient Egyptians were drawing these two people, they would make her have long hair and the guy have short hair. But there's a problem here because, in Africa, people have well, in every single culture, people, men and women, generally have the same length of hair. Let's give another example, and you can see here, you're seeing it again and again and again. Light skin, dark skin. Oh, yeah, by the way, as I was talking about the variations, so you will see that women, especially in Africa, they tend to have a different type of body, obviously, than the men, but it is much more, well, basically the shape that we know from Africa. But this variation between the bodies is not necessarily respected or even the same in other countries. And this is the type of variation that you will see in Egypt as well. I mean, it's easy for me to pull it up and just pull people from Asian countries or European countries or Indian countries because their bodies are just not the same as that in Africa. And I'm talking about people of normal weight. Here's another couple from another country in Africa, right? By the way, none of these I pulled like, oh, let me go and fetch specific images. I could pull random ones from Google at any moment, and this variation will exist. Doesn't even matter how dark skinned they are, which is why I should leave the best example for last, which is South Sudanese people. You will notice that even though they're South Sudanese and the men tend to be dark as ever, the women tend to be dark as well. When you put the men next to the woman, still light skin. This is the association between light skin for women and dark skin for men. So when we talk about the symbology of the woman of ancient Egypt, we're not talking about a symbology that came out of nowhere. We're talking about they're taken from real life. Women tend to be lighter skinned than the men do, and so they play with this as a sign of femininity. So if a man marries a woman who's darker than them, they could say that that woman is more masculine than other women. So, like I said, women don't generally get painted as much darker than any of their male counterparts, whether it be husband, son, anything like that. But Queen Amose, who is an exception, you can see is painted as extremely dark skinned. Now, what's interesting here is that a lot of people will say this is symbolic, which is like, why is it all of a sudden symbolic when before you want to accept it as a real skin color? Is it symbolic or not? So you can see here, again, I'm saying that it's a combination of symbology and a combination of reality. And so Queen Amose must have been darker than her husband, and then they exaggerate her darkness in order to show that this woman is extremely dark. Just like how with the men and the woman, they exaggerate the difference in skin color in order to show their femininity. And you can see with those wedding photos that when a woman is standing there glowing in front of a man who is steeped in darkness, the thing that you see is that the woman radiates. And this is what they were playing off of.
Who are somewhat of a reddish brown complexion. Okay, and when you
Can
look
I-
at the mummies,
Can I take a moment?
go ahead.
Hey Andy, I actually have that image that he's referring to.
Uh-huh.
If you don't mind if I screen share.
Yeah, do that.
Go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
This is the actual image that you're talking about, correct?
I can't see it.
It's
Can
it's
you-
on.
Here,
You
here,
wanna,
here, I'll-
Can you?
yeah,
you want to present my screen?
yeah, I'm presenting the screen.
Okay. So sorry. This is the image.
You see it?
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, that is a distorted image. That's not the accurate image.
Oh,
Okay.
I have the other image actually.
Because the real image on that image right here that you're showing,
Yeah.
that image it shows the Asiatics as white. Okay, they are as white as the Tamahu or the Timahu. Okay,
Yeah.
it's not supposed to look like that, and it shows the ancient Egyptians as light brown. Okay, but on the actual rendering, okay, that is a false rendering. There's another rendering that shows all four races of mankind with four different complexions.
I think I know which image you're also talking about.
We will.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have that one or?
I do have that one.
Yeah.
I actually made a video on that image
Mm.
where it shows the
That image.
actual tomb images compared to the. There we go, right there.
That image.
Yes,
The artistic rendering image.
yes, that is the most accurate image right there.
So both of them are actually incorrect in this one. You can see, obviously, if you pull up the image, that a lot of people say that this is where they got the four races from. But in real life, this is not a table of races, the way that there is actually a table of races in ancient Egypt done in Ramses' time. This is pulled from this. And you can see that this building is so distorted and stuff that it's hard to get the real colors of the people. If you look at the Nubian in the middle, who's black as hell, you can tell that this person is black with no exception. But this is only one person's skin color. There's other images of Nubians all over ancient Egypt, and they're not this black. Again, it has to go down back to symbology where they take real life and then they over exaggerate it. Just like how some of the people who are painted white, might have a yellow tone and then they over exaggerate it. But let's look at the Asiatics who are right at the side behind the Nubians. You can tell that they're yellow. But if you go on the other side, you can see that there's some people there standing who are clearly pale skin. And so there is something there to be said about the differences in skin color, which is probably represented in that image of Seti, that recreation with the four people standing there. It's probably an accuracy level that is there. But in that image, which let me pull it up. So here you have the four people, right, who are considered accurate colors, which let's just go with that. Obviously, we saw ourselves that these colors are not accurate. These guys, for example, who represent the guy just behind the Egyptian, you can tell that they're painted yellow, not white, which means that that is inaccurate. But the guy on the other side, the uh, sort of sea people, they're painted with a pure white skin, which is kind of accurate if you look at the images. But if you know anything about this tomb, you will realize instantly that these are guesses of where these people necessarily come from. That one is Asiatic and one is of the sea people or Libyan or anything like that. But, well, I'll get back to that another time. The real important part is that notice the difference between the two people. So let's pretend the two people just represent a Middle Eastern type of view. Notice how they look nothing like the Egyptian or the Nubian. And in fact, the Egyptian looks like a middle between the Middle Eastern. So the Egyptian looks like the middle between the Middle Eastern and an Asiatic. So maybe like a mixed race thing, sort of like how Ethiopians look like. And but all of this sort of makes sense, right? Because obviously we have people like Herodotus and all of these people saying that the ancient Egyptians were black, but this variation they say is like, oh, they've got some kind of light, a little bit lighter than the Nubians, which in the face of this image makes 100% sense. But if you then take the DNA studies that have come out, the way that the modern people interpret it, everything starts to fall apart. It's like they're making it sound like the ancient Egyptians are the same as the Middle Easterners, which means that they believe that the ancient Egyptians looked like these people who are painted here with a white skin. That's what they believe. So this image here would be useless to them. They would say this is a lie because the ancient Egyptians should look like these two pale people. And there's no way of getting around that. Now, for those of you that don't know, there is actually a tomb of Ramses III that shows the races as well. Again, this is not table of races the way that these people like to put it. Like they were just going, this is an Asian, this is an Egyptian. Instead, they put these people down and then write down the word next to it, whether it's a Nubian or not, but they're not putting it down in the same table stands. And you can see at the bottom that they depict three types of people: Egyptian, they depict a Libyan, and they depict Nubians. And the Libyans who are depicted are nowhere near as light as the images that we're given. This variation as well, to me, speaks to something. I'll get back to it. But in some cases, Libyans are referred to as Nubians. And some people ignore that 100%. And this is because in Libya, there are clearly two races of people living there: a somewhat lighter skin of people, and then a very dark skin of people. And some of them definitely come from Nubia. And I've shown you that they are Nilo-Saharan people who live in Libya, who lived in West Africa for thousands of years, which is probably why you have this variation. that you have some people who are of a moderate skin color, and then some people who are jet black because they come from the Nilo-Saharan types of people or the Nilotic type of people. Also, you can see that they're dressed exactly the same as that person, open in one area and closed in the other. This must be something that they saw often because they depicted a lot. Now, you will see in this image here where Shasu, which is a Bedouin, which represents Middle Eastern people. Bedouin people, if you look at them today, they are of this skin color, this darkness. So yes, these are the dark-skinned people of the Middle East. In fact, if you remember, I had a book that was done by a black person in the Middle East who was part of the Islamic Golden Age, and he was talking about black people of the world, and he put the Bedouin in with the rest of the black people. So he put Indians, the Bedouin, Africans into the same group, and he called them the black people of the world, and they were all being discriminated against for their dark color. And yes, the Bedouin are dark, but notice how the Bedouin, who are as dark as I'm showing you in the screen, are the same color as the Chenehu, who are the Libyans. Yet somehow the people who distort it, they take the black areas or the dark areas of the person's face as like just highlights, and so they make the person extremely pale skin with dark lights in the areas, like shadow areas. But no, this is what they look like, much darker than this. Also, the hair is made smoother, of course, as a distortion as well. These people clearly had like braided hair. Now, I know there's some people who are like, our ancestors have never changed for thousands of years. Based on the way they dressed, you can tell that there's been a significant difference between the Libyans of old and the Libyans of new. And Islam is the biggest distorter of this. Let me tell you what I don't mind. I don't mind if there's a debate, right, that you're having, and you say, I believe they were of Middle Eastern descent, but they were dark skinned. But then you have to admit that the pale skin that dominates Libya today is from somewhere else.
The artistic rendering image done by, I believe his name was Giovanni Battista Belzoni.
So,
Yes.
so that's not the original.
No, it's not the original because the original
What's the most
was
accurate?
significantly damaged by time.
Mm.
Significantly damaged if you actually look at it. And we can actually go to the Tomb of Seti. There's an actual virtual tour that you can take of the Tomb of Seti I. And if you look through the entire tomb, you'll find that there are a variety of different images depicting people of all different skin tones, all looking like Egyptians with their own Egyptian garb, right? But they're all different skin tones. So I have to ask, if you're going to use the Tomb of Seti I as a reference with regards to prove your point, how can you reconcile the rest of the tomb as opposed to this artist rendering of something that has been damaged throughout time in the tomb on a wall?
So I'm going to agree and disagree with her at the same time. So you can see here, obviously, in the Tomb of Seti, that there is this quote unquote variation of color, but they're all somewhat dark brown and they're all on that level. There is not that variation where there's like pale skinned people inside the Tomb of Seti ever. So this is where I agree with her a little bit, because I think there's a little bit of people who they like to cast foreign aspersions on people who are from certain areas. So the Nubians are Egyptians. The dark-skinned people, they are Egyptians. And so when we look at that photo where they say these is what the Nubians look like and this is what the Egyptians look like, they're pulling that out from nowhere. No. Egyptians are being depicted, but some of them are extremely dark skinned because they have that Nubian influence. Nubians are Egyptians. The Temahu that you're seeing as well, they're also Egyptians. They're being depicted that way because they preserve some of their culture, but they're also still Egyptians. And then, of course, you have the other Egyptians to the north who also preserve a certain culture. And that's the thing about Egypt that is very subtle. The fact that you have many groups of people who are living inside Egypt, but if you ask them, they would be like, I'm Egyptian. They wouldn't say I'm Temahu. They wouldn't say I'm Sudanese. They wouldn't say any of that stuff. They would say they're Egyptian. but there's a little bit of a game that's being played by people to be like, okay, these are the definite races, but there's no definite races. The Nubians who lived in Nubia are Egyptian. The Temehu who lived on the western side of Egypt are Egyptian.
Okay, first of all, the tomb image itself is somewhat faded. It looks nothing like it did, during the time of Seti, was 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. It looked nothing like that. Many of the images in ancient Egypt, in Egypt today, are faded by time. Okay, some people say, well, these images darken by time. No, actually, they lighten by time. Okay, because when something fades, that means it gets lighter. Okay, do you understand that? Okay.
Yes, I do understand that.
Yes. Okay.
But
So, of course, we've had this debate of whether they fade by time or whether they darken by the time. The point of that argument, I think people are missing out, is that some images are pretty much useless because we can't tell what happened. Whether they darkened or faded, it actually doesn't matter. What matters is that the color has been distorted, and what we need to find are images that are still accurate to this day. So there's papyrus you can look at. There's all kinds of things which held up in a much more color specific way than these walls, which, by the way, the walls, if you go and look around, right, you go look at different walls from different tombs, you will see that, okay, this one is darkened, this one has lightened. And how can I tell? Because it's the same exact person. And in some cases, by the way, when I say same exact person, like a god, for example, there are some tombs where you will see um, the god Anubis, right, depicted, and he's got brown skin clearly, and in some he's got much darker brown, and then in some he's got much lighter brown, and you can tell, okay, that variety is probably not due to artistic choice and more due to fading or darkening of the skin. You don't need to be a genius to think of this.
So
lighting is usually what fades images, and these are in tombs underground. So how exactly do you reconcile that?
what is again? Lighting?
Lighting is usually sun. Ultraviolet rays is usually what fades color from artistic, pigmentation. So how could exactly fading occur underground?
While lighting is not the only thing that can make the colors fade, she makes a good point of the people who lived underground. These buildings, right, that were sealed, did not have a lot of light coming in. Now, it's not that they had zero light, but they didn't have a lot of light coming in. A lot of the fading happened in the last happened in the last few hundreds of years when people opened up the tomb. Now, something that she doesn't realize is that the tombs of ancient Egypt were opened by people who wanted to steal the gold for thousands of years, and so a lot of them were actually exposed to light. They weren't even sealed, and even later, when people came and started blowing up doors or hatching through doors, it was easier than before because blocks had already been moved. There's actually documentaries about this. It's called Grave Robbers. I mean, that's where Tomb Raiders, that's where that whole thing comes from. And these Tomb Raiders, they would, ancient Egyptians, they build these big blocks in front of the doors. But then when you get there later, there's like small bricks that hold up the door because some of it state institutionalized, right? So when Egypt was running out of money, sometimes they would go inside the pyramids and go fetch gold, go get it. And then they would fix it because they still kind of respect their own religion. And then they would put up a weak door but then, people come in, hatch it, crack it open. So there was definitely times of light in there. But also notice here that the distortion is not merely a problem of light. I mean, look at some of these, like the dust, the paint falls off, all of this stuff that happens around that it makes us lose things. Now, I could tell instantly which people they would say are Asiatic and which people are not Asiatic, but let's zoom in so we can see. So the people at the top, almost everybody would agree that all those people are Egyptian males because they're colored in dark skin and they're pretty much wearing the same exact thing. Very amazing. I forget sometimes how beautiful Egypt is. But when you come down here, you can see that there are a variety of so called races. So, as you can see, the people at the front look a bit like Asiatics, at least in the rendering of those images. Now, are these people Asiatic or are they actually Egyptians? That's a difficult question because, we talked today about nations and all of that, and there's a difference between how you would interpret it. But whatever you choose, they are different than the people standing right behind them, the dark skinned Egyptians. And this is where things get difficult, which is, let's pretend that these guys are actually Egyptian. Well, these three guys at the front who wear the clothes that we associate with Egypt, so you can see there it's got the same pattern and everything. And notice how not as pale as they are. Look at the skin color of these people, the difference, the distortion. The guys are literally like a mild brown, but then here they're painted as like super pale. But yes, if you notice that these people are somewhat different than the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians seem to be ridiculously dark. It almost reminds me of the wedding photos that you see between the variation between the males and the females. And I always say that. I always say Asiatics, when they're depicted, they're almost always depicted starting the males who are walking around bare chested. They always start with a yellow that is depicted of the females, which makes no sense if you're saying the men are tan and the women are they're staying indoors or whatever you want to pick, because how does that make sense when we have Asiatic people who are painted walking around the same way and they're not tanning like the ancient Egyptians? So what gives?
Well, we do know that they were faded. I mean, because if you look at the statues, you see like on some of them, you see like a little inchy. I mean, just a little bit of paint, like little leftovers, of paint on the face. So, and I don't know if this was caused by the sun or whatever, or somebody, or somebody going, somebody doing it on purpose. We can't really say that. Saying so, but we do know that a lot of the images, some of them don't even have color at all. Some of them you just see like little spots of color of showing that it used to have color, but the majority of the statue have no color at all. It's just stone. Now,
Okay.
so
So there's a lot to be said about statues, and in fact the majority of statues that we have don't have any color. But it has been obviously theorized that all of them were painted. As we can see in the tomb of Rekhmire, we actually see people who look like they're painting the statues of Egypt. Now, to be fair, it's kind of difficult to imagine that somebody would be painting the statues of Egypt at the same time when they're still cracking it and smoothing it in order to make the statues. You can tell that this is a very big statue, as you can see with the different levels of people. By the way, notice this sort of step thing that they've invented to stand on while they work. This is the type of stuff that disappears through the ages, but would exist in many parts of Africa. So this might be the person adding some type of substance that will make it easier for the person to crack. Because notice he's not painting the head or the body of the pharaoh; he's painting the rock exterior area, which I think that's just making it softer. I actually think a lot of ancient Egyptian statues remained unpainted, to be honest. The one they're depicting is just about the same size as this one, but let's get to another one. Notice that there's still no paint, but there is a lot of smoothing happening. What's happening with that thing he's holding in his hand? That's smoothing, it's sanding it down.
So,
oh,
Radio,
go,
what's
go
your
ahead.
perspective of the amount of white people and black people that there were in Egypt at the time? What do you think
First
there
of
was a
all,
percentage, or do you think all of them were more brown?
So the person who's asking a question is called J.F. Gerepe. He's a French guy, and he's a race realist, or racist, really is the word. And he's not all over bad guy, but he does ask a good question, which is, what percentage are you talking about? Now, for me, it's always been a matter of percentage. It starts off with the earliest people being of a black African type, joined in by some Middle Easterners, and then later the dwindling numbers happen because of the constant invasions. And so it's always been a percentage. And in the beginning, I would put it at about 95.5% Middle Eastern, and then I would maybe by the middle put it at about 75-25, and then later I would put it at about, you know, 30% native Egyptian, and then the rest are just Greek, Persian, all of these things, and only 30%. But that's all a guess. I have no idea. But I do know that you will find. This is why the genetics thing is sort of hilarious, because they go, "Oh, we found someone who is from the Middle East." Well, of course, the Middle East is right there. I've never said you will never find people from the Middle East. Now, the people from the Middle East aren't going to be as white as you would like to think. In fact, they won't be white, which is one of the problems. Is that they also think that people from the Middle East were all white, but you will see that they're not. By the way, there's a reason why they insist. So this is an image, a painting of Syrians in Egypt. You will notice that they're not pale white as you would like to think. Now, a lot of people from Syria do have very light skin today. But the reason why they have that light skin is because of the Indo-European invasion that changed the skin color of not only India, not only Russia, not only Europe, but the whole of the Middle East. This is why it starts off with a little bit of a bias, but that's something we have to talk about another day. Now, here's the thing. When they depict them in movies, when they depict them in all these things, they sort of first accept it in real life. They go, yeah, I guess everybody was sort of brown in the past. But then when it comes to movies and stuff like that, they go use white people to depict them, which is like, there's something wrong there. You're still going back to the white skin, which was very rare in the past. But as I mentioned, the skin color of the Middle Easterners still started off as the yellow of the females in Egypt.
Well, me, well, first of all, I go by what historical records say. Okay, a
What
lot of
does it say?
people, okay, a lot of people, they, some people go by genetics. I don't go by genetics, okay, because a lot of the genetics are based on theories. Okay, first of all, they're based on theories, and when they say that, when they talk about a certain haplogroup, they can't even, they can't even come to a conclusion that what place of origin that haplogroup come from. Some say when you look on Wikipedia or whatever, or you read any DNA study, they say a possible place of origin for this type of haplogroup. So I don't go by genetics. Okay,
Well,
and
I
I'm
would
not
say
an
on
expert
that
in
point, I
genetics.
would say that is absolutely false. We can trace back where the ancestry comes from based on certain genotype. And in fact,
You can't.
there is data, genetic data that was obtained from an ancient mummy. This was published in Nature, and it reveals a close relationship between the mummy and Middle Easterners rather than Central Africans. Do you deny the existence of these studies?
So let's first start by addressing what they talked about so that we can put a time period. Like I mentioned, this is from a while back, this debate, and it's actually possibly close to 2018, 19 when this debate took place, because all the other studies had not come out yet. The one that had just come out was the 2017 study, and all, obviously, the quote unquote race realists or whatever they wanted to call racists, they grabbed on to this idea of, oh, 2017 study shows that the ancient Egyptians, even though there were a whole bunch of people who pushed back on the concept, first of all, a very small sample, he makes it even worse. He says one person. It was three people, but if it was one person, it would have been like, we got one person, therefore the entire race of the ancient Egyptians were Middle Eastern. Come on, stop. And these people from a later period, and they only depicted a few types of people, and we know there were Nubians in Africa. So even if Nubians were the only black Africans, the fact that you haven't even found the DNA for that in ancient times tells you that you're not even close to cracking the code. Now, when he says I don't go by genetics, and he says the haplogroup, a lot of them, they don't have origin, he's being very specific. We do know that haplogroups of some kind can be traced to specific areas, but a lot of haplogroups in very contested areas, they're all over the place for where they could come from, because even though you can trace DNA, you can't necessarily trace place of origin. A good example of this is Jewish DNA. So a lot of people who have Jewish DNA, they trace it and move it all the way to Israel, but in real life, that DNA corresponds with people in Europe, the Ashkenazi DNA.
Okay, so if the mummy have Eurasian or Middle Eastern DNA, then why call it Egyptian?
Well, because
Okay,
that
because
person lived in Egypt clearly, so it was an Egyptian by the fact that it was living there. But that person shows DNA origins that are outside of Africa.
I have a question for Radio One. Do you consider yourself African?
Yes, I am African.
But you don't live in Africa, do you? And have you ever?
Have I ever lived in Africa? No, I'm African American.
Well,
No.
then by your own logic, people who maybe are from the Levant or another region of the world, but have also lived in Egypt or are hailing from Egypt or have had ancestors that lived in Egypt at the time, still constitute as Egyptian, correct?
Well, no, I can't go with that because I deal with logic. Okay, I'm not.
deal with logic?
That's
So already here we're dealing with a specific problem, which is 2 against 1. Which I'm not saying he didn't ask for that. I mean, he's going through it. He's clearly not running away. But they're asking him too many questions at the same time. One, of course, being the other guy, the French guy, saying that he wants to talk about the DNA, and then this girl brings up the Weibo brings up the idea that ancient Egyptians who are Asiatic living there would be considered Egyptians, while people who live in America who are black would still be considered Africans. Now, this is a debate that I'm not even willing to go into, but we know that different people would put these in different categories. The real point that Radio One is trying to say is, if they're not native Egyptian, why are they called Egyptian? Why, if the DNA matches Asiatic, why don't they just consider that Asiatic DNA? Why call it Egyptian? Like, if they found my DNA, right, in Japan, they would say this guy is clearly African. If they found my DNA in Africa, they'd say he's African. If they found my DNA in Europe, they'd say he's African. If they found my DNA in Australia, they'd say he's African. So why here not say, well, these people we found are Asiatic, not Egyptians? The reason for that is because there is a complete erasure of native Egyptian DNA. They're not even looking for it. They're not going, we need to find who the first people who stayed in Egypt were. If we keep finding Asiatic DNA, then clearly we have not hit the native DNA of ancient Egyptians. But they're not even looking for it. Or if they found it, they keep throwing it away.
like somebody saying that's like somebody saying that a white person or a Spanish person is black. Okay, because my people say that all the time. Well, Spanish people are black. Well, we all black. We say no. I don't go with that. Okay, if that person was not native to Egypt, okay, no matter what time for point of time that they arrived in Egypt, they cannot be considered Egyptian. Okay.
So
But,
how far back
like
did
I
you
said,
take that? Just curious. Does it qualify as far back as, say, 1,500 or 150,000 years ago? Because
First
according
of all,
to
I'm
the
just
African origin paradigm, it says that most of our ancestors hailed and migrated from Africa initially.
well, that's dealing with genetics, okay? And
No,
genetics,
that's dealing with
based on
migration
genetics. No. Based on genetics, okay?
Yeah.
It speaks of a back migration. Okay, it says a certain group of people left Africa and then came back into Africa. Okay.
So does that not
But
make them,
according to, huh?
does that not make them African origin? Is that not their home
Now,
as well?
like I said, these genetic migrations, they are based on theories. Okay. Now when
Okay.
we go into historical, when we go into the historical facts, the historical reality, the first documented foreign invasion into Egypt was the Hyksos invasion.
Okay, good. So I wanted to get into this area of it. So, of course, the Hyksos invasion is the first invasion that is documented from Asia coming in. And it tells us of a people who are different than that of the ancient Egyptians. And I know it's going to upset some people who watch me because they like to say that a lot of the people in the Middle East are also Black Africans. And I'm not even denying that there were Black Africans in the Middle East. I've shown you evidence that there's Black Africans. But this is where there's a separation for me, because a lot of the people in the Middle East who come in from this time, I want them to show us the clear separation between the natives and those. If you can't show it, then you cannot make any conclusions about who is really Egyptian and who's an invader. Because how can you do that? Like that's like, for example, let's take West Africa. So some parts of West Africa, some people got invaded, they got taken over. If you do the genetics, right, the people are going to still come out as West African, no matter who they are. So how are you going to separate the invaders from the non-invading forces? This is the problem. And so they just go, oh, we found genetics of Middle East in Egypt, therefore Egypt was Middle Eastern. Yeah, but who are the natives? Are those the natives, or is that an invading force? Is that a native? Is that some marriage from the outer field? Is that Hyksos? What is that DNA that you're finding? And of course, they still have to answer this question. Are they saying that Africa was empty? Because that's how you, if you completely remove the idea that there were native black people living in that area before back migration into Africa, then what you're saying is that that area was empty. Or you're saying that the Middle Easterners genocided the entire North Africans. That's one of the two things that you're saying. And that's where I'm yet to hear an answer. And then, of course, you have to explain why they're so dark and why Middle Easterners today are so light skinned and all this other stuff, which we do have many answers for. But
okay, anytime before that, it's just theory. Okay, you have the
Anytime before
Hyksos
that?
invasion into Egypt, and you have after that you have the sea people. Okay, that was some people said they came from Greece or Anatolia somewhere. Then after that, you had the Assyrians, the Persians, the Greek Macedonians, the Romans, and the Arabs. Okay, but anytime before the Hyksos invasion, it's all a guess. It's all a theory.
all a guess?
Okay? It's all
So
a guess.
So,
Yes.
I have
it's
a
very
question.
easy of you to discard an entire field of science saying it's just theories. How else do you
Yes, it's theory.
explain that a mummy
If you ask them that, they will
clearly
they
came
will tell you that.
clearly
so this happens a lot in this debate where they derail the conversation to talk about general reality. And yes, this is pretty sad. Now, the thing that I want to talk about in this general reality is that they're talking past each other. Yes, the DNA stuff is all a theory, and it is theories, but theory doesn't mean fake. The thing that is not taken seriously by me in this conversation is that some people think, let's just get out of it. I'll get back to this.
came from Middle Eastern areas. How do you explain that the genes would be in that mummy?
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
other explanation than some migration. Go ahead, Weibo.
It's fine if he discounts it based on a theory, but I have to ask, Radio 1, do you believe
It
in
is not
gravity?
fine.
Hang on. Do you believe in gravity?
Do I believe in gravity?
Yes.
Well, what's the point?
Just yes or no.
Well, yes.
Okay, well, gravity is also a theory. Do you believe in around Earth?
Around Earth.
Yes.
No.
I'm just asking.
Well, yes. But
What I'm saying is that's also a theory, but just
I
because it's
don't
technically a theory
have
does
wings
not
and I can
invalidate.
fly around the entire Earth. So that's irrelevant.
What I'm saying is just because something is technically a theory does not mean it's invalid. If something is a hypothesis, that means it has a little bit less backing than your average theory does. But your average theory has a little bit more scientific backing than just a.
See, but the problem listen. But the problem with you guys theories. Okay, but the problem with the theories made up by the geneticists. Okay, the problem is that they are not supported by historical fact.
Okay, and what is historical fact?
Okay, the writings. Okay, the ancient writings that were left by the ancients. Okay.
So I'm not going to edit it too much because there's no point, but I don't want to get into the whole like what is a theory and all of that. But yes, he is right here that the writings do not match the DNA things that we're getting, and you would think that that would make them hesitant to say, oh yes, because the writings don't match, then we are still looking for more. But they just go, we got the information, we're done. Which, by the way, if they're done, then don't look for any more DNA. If it's over, never look for more DNA.
Writings?
We can read nowhere. Okay, no. Okay, when we deal with the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, okay?
Yes.
It speaks nothing. Okay, I'm just gonna break it down. Okay, we got the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Okay, we got the Mesopotamian documents. Okay, and we got the ancient Greeks and Romans. Okay, from Herodotus to Diodorus Siculus to Strabo to Pliny. Okay. Okay, all of them. Okay, this is a vast amount of history that you guys seem to be ignoring and skipping over. Okay, because
Okay, what did they say?
Okay.
By the way, the reason why she's saying what do they say is because she has no idea. Now, we've gone through this. I'm not going to show them. I can link other videos that I've had talking about this, but clearly all of them were convinced that these people were black in color. And a lot of them, they even go as further to say that the ancient Egyptians are culturally linked to the Nubians. Now, that's a very important thing because, again, they have neighbors to the east, they have neighbors to the west. They could have easily been culturally related to those people, but they say they were culturally related to the Nubians. And this is all of the writers up until the 1900s. Even Europeans in the 1700s or 1600s or whatever, or the Middle Easterners from the Golden Age of Islam, they all connected it to Africa.
Now, according to them, okay, they never spoke of a 30 to 40,000 year old migration. Okay, that's like I said, that's all based on theory. That's just someone guess. Now, if we had historical records where we can read that, okay, that'd be perfect. Okay, but going to the archaeology. Okay, first of all, my question to you is, Egypt was.
I'm sorry.
So
Can you repeat that? You cut out for a sec there. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Just repeat what you just said.
Now, my question to you is, do you know who the first pharaoh of ancient Egypt was?
Do I know who the first pharaoh of ancient Egypt was? No, I do not know that off the top of my head. Do you know that?
Yes, his name was Menes. Okay, Pharaoh Narmer.
So this goes back to what I was talking about in the very beginning when I said that the people who try to prove that the ancient Egyptians are black are armed with the complete knowledge of ancient Egypt. They don't even need to be scholars, but what they do is they go study the entire history of Egypt, how many dynasties there are, the different localities, the different types of kings, the different types of royal holdings, the possibility of whether there was a democracy or not in Egypt at one point, and all of these things they study deeply, including the name of the ancients. And then these people come armed with nothing. You don't even know who the first pharaoh of Egypt is, which is probably what they teach you when you're still in high school. But you don't even know that piece of information, yet you want to speak with deep authority about ancient Egypt. And this is the thing that needs to be respected, that a lot of people, they have deep knowledge of Egypt, yet they're being dismissed as if they're just, oh yeah, we're just saying stuff. They don't know. None of them, by the way, knew about Narmer. And now you're going to notice that she's going to have Google in front of her face so that she doesn't look embarrassed again when she Googles names.
Yes.
And okay, the historians call him Menes. Okay, and he's also documented in the ancient kings list at Karnak and Abydos, which was written by Tutmosis III and Ramesses II. Okay, according to them and according to the historian Herodotus, this was the first king of Egypt, the first historical king of Egypt. Okay, before him, they talk about the gods Horus, and Osiris. Well, that's just myth. Okay, that's not historical. So I'm not even going to entertain that. Okay, but this was the first historical king of Egypt.
What was his name again?
His name was Menes. Okay, he is known on his palette as Narmer. Okay, some say he is called Narmer. Some say he is called Menes. This was the first historical king of Egypt. He was the founder of pharaonic Egypt and the founder of the first dynasty.
I can already see what she's gonna do. She's gonna Google it and try to test him to try and get the win back that this guy already had. But I'm not even worried because this guy is armed with full knowledge. Now, let's go back to what he said, that Narmer is considered generally the first pharaoh of Egypt, which is fine, but we must remember that there are other kings as well that existed prior to this date, and they matter because even though they didn't represent a unified Egypt, they still represented the history of Egypt in a deep way, in a true way that needs to be respected. And they need to be investigated too. And when you're doing DNA tests, it must go beyond just when, oh yeah, we started Narmer, and then we go, no, start before that, because Egypt was forming before that.
Okay.
Question: he's the one that lived 3,100 BC, correct?
Yes, that's just a guess date, but some say but some say that it's older than that because according to what ancient Egyptian historians say, okay, a lot of kings, yeah.
Which
According
Egyptian
to
historians?
yeah, according to them, a lot of kings that were kings of Egypt were not documented. Okay,
But
but
which ones? When did they live? Was that
what's that?
31,000 BC, 3100 BC?
Yes, that's
Just let them talk. We've already exposed yourself that you don't know much about ancient Egyptian history, and you really came to debate about the race. But this is the funny part as well, though. People say, quote unquote, Afrocentrists like to debate the race of ancient Egyptians. Yeah, because we can't debate anything else with the other people because they don't know anything about the other information. What do you want to debate about? What type of cloth they wore? I could tell you. What do you want to debate about? Whether they sanded things? What do you want to debate about? You want to debate about the soil? You want to debate about the trees? You want to the tea, the land? You want to debate about the hills? You want to debate about what do you want to debate about that is outside of the race of the ancient Egyptians? Because we're armed with that knowledge. We know a lot about it, but for some reason, the only thing they care about from our angle is the race of the ancient Egyptians. And the reason why we care too is because they're they care about it to a point where they lie about it. For any of you listening, does this guy sound like someone who only paid attention to the race of the ancient Egyptians?
well,
That's what you're talking about?
that's the proper date. That's
No,
the
I mean,
minimum date.
which historians are you talking about that know of this? Minis.
One of them is named Manetho.
Okay.
Manetho.
And did he live 3,100 years ago?
No, he did not. He lived.
So
He
then
lived
how
during,
would he know?
because he was an Egyptian priest. Okay, and he kept records of his ancestors. Okay, and he.
Okay, but he
you know,
didn't actually experience it the moment that he was?
No,
No, so it's just a theory then? Or they're oral traditional stories passed down through generations?
no. It's not a theory because what he is saying is coming from the tombs of Egypt. Okay.
So then the primary source you're referencing are hieroglyphics from the tombs of Egypt.
Yes.
Which
yes.
tombs?
Well, they have a king's list. Okay, one is in Abydos, and the
Notice how she has become very debatatory in the way that she's talking now. Every single piece of information that that this guy is saying, she has some kind of question that keeps going in another way. And the funny part is he keeps answering them, and she gets lost. She has to go okay by the end because she has no more questions. And the only reason she's doing it is because she feels like she got hit by an arrow, right? So she got chipped, right? She got hit a little bit, and now she's like, wait a minute, how do I go back and sort of submit myself as like we're just two people who have equal information debating? And the answer is you can't. You don't know the first pharaoh of Egypt. You don't know the first thing about Egypt.
other one is on the Temple of Karnak. Okay, and the first king that is documented is a king called Menes. What they call him, Menes. Okay.
Okay, so what about
And,
Menes?
huh?
What about Menes?
Okay, King Menes.
So after wasting time asking questions when he could have just explained what he was, the point that he was trying to get at, she's getting frustrated. Like, oh, you kept saying the word menace 100 times. Yeah, because you kept interrupting for no reason. And now that he answered all of your questions, it goes nowhere. It just stops. And now you want to pretend like, oh, what about him? You just brought him up for no reason. No, he brought him up because he wanted to say that Menez came from the south. He came from the areas that are what people would typically call Nubian areas. And then he married a woman from the quote unquote Nubian areas. So if the founder of Egypt is literally a Nubian, what does that say? By the way, the palette itself was found in the Nubian areas.
Okay, he was the founder of Memphis. Now, do you know what Memphis is?
Yes, it was the capital
Okay,
of
Memphis.
various different times throughout Egyptian history. Of course, the
Okay,
capital
yeah,
of Egypt in ancient times did alternate from city to city. Currently, it's Cairo, but continue.
Yeah, Memphis.
So I slowed that down on purpose because clearly she read that. Like I said, now she's got the Wikipedia up and she's arming herself with the knowledge because it's very difficult to come back from her getting hit. She literally got struck like, oh my God, how did I not know that information? This guy could just bring it up. By the way, this guy's computer, you can tell, is lagging and everything. So he can't even look these things up because his computer is not working very well. But let's address what she just said. So she said Cairo. Anybody knows that Cairo is said Cairo. That's how I can prove to you that she read it. Cario is what she said.
The city. Currently, it's Cario, but continue.
Yeah, Memphis.
It's Cairo. And if you knew that, you would not have to say it in a way like you're reading it. And I've done this before where like Tobago or something when it's whatever, Tobago. Like, yeah, I just read that. I have no idea what that place was. Actually, I knew about it, but I didn't know how to say it.
Was okay. It's some will say that it's okay. Yeah, it is in northern Egypt. Okay, but Menes. Okay, according to the historical account, Menes was a native king of the south. Okay, he came from
Of the south.
yeah, he came
According
from the
to
south. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I'm just making
Okay,
sure I have you
so-
correctly. So, according to who, he was a king of the south.
Yeah, he was first before he became pharaoh and the uniter of the two lands.
Mhm.
He was the first. He was the king of the south. Okay,
Where?
Now,
South where? South where?
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, the general understanding by people is that the south is Nubia and then the north represents Asians. So if we take this type of reality, Asians in the north, in the south there's Nubians, and obviously I don't believe that, but let's just run with it. The problem, one of the biggest problems they have, is that the southern pharaoh would be in the heart of Nubia. That means that Nubia unified the north and south, meaning that Nubia is responsible for Egypt. Whether they're all Asians or whatever, Nubia is responsible for unifying them both through Narmer. Now, here's the question. The people who accept this, the people who go by this, do they state this? This is what I'm talking about when we say the native Egyptians. Do they state this? Do they clarify this? Do they? Nope. They just go, it must have been Asiatics. What about the history, the historical record? What about all of this? Nope, doesn't matter. Nothing matters. The only thing that matters is that we find some Asian DNA sometimes. And the fact that we've found some Black African DNAs doesn't matter.
the south was called Thebes. Okay, or the Thebaid. Yeah, it was we call it. Some people call it Waset, which is it's modern day Luxor. Okay, Luxor, Aswan, Elephantine. Okay, that is the southern part of Egypt.
Okay.
Now, according to record,
Someone remind me to link my videos that talk about these places in the south as well, because they are very instrumental in the history of Egypt, which is why it's laughable sometimes when people go, oh yeah, the people in the south are like this and the people in the north are like that. And then of course there's the story of Senuhe. The story of Senuhe depicts the people of the south as connected to the other people, so people from Sudan and places like that. And then he says that the people in the north are connected to people in other parts of Egypt, but at no point does he connect Asia to Egypt, but he connects southern Egypt to Sudan. But again, historical record, like I said, historical record, like he said, goes against almost everything that they believe today. But they just go, oh, genetics. And it's like, but your genetics isn't even consistent with what you're talking about. To put it another way, imagine if we were doing the DNA tests of Chinese people, right? And we do DNA tests and they constantly come back as, let's say, let's pick a race. Let's say they keep coming back as Swedish people. And we go, well, there's something that just doesn't make sense over here. After a while, someone has to realize that you're probably not going deep enough, and there probably was a population of Swedish people that moved to China at some point, but they don't represent the general population. And we can tell just by looking at the people who live in China and have lived in China and are depicted in historical record as Chinese people, and that there's something going on that is amiss.
the first king came from this region.
Mhm.
Okay, he came from the southern part of Egypt. Okay, the southern part of Egypt that borders the Sudan. Okay, not the part of Egypt in the north that borders the Mediterranean. Okay, he did not come from that part of Egypt.
Okay.
He came from the southern interior. Okay, so when you people say that the ancient Egyptians were a Mediterranean people, okay, I don't want to curse, but okay, you are full of you know what when you say that.
Yeah, this is
people
a
came from the
family show.
Mediterranean.
Everyone calm down. It's a family show.
Now that he's bringing the scholarship and they're in too deep, they're going to move to jokes. So the other guy jumps in with his own joke. She keeps saying okay every time he's saying okay. because again, she ran out of things to say. But the important is what he's saying is so important, and they have no rebuttal. By the way, when someone says like something like this, she's been challenging everything he's been saying, but when he says this, she has no challenge for it whatsoever, because Narmer did come from the south. Narmer did unify Egypt from the south, meaning that even if the people in the north are Asiatics, it's the Nubians that unified Egypt. And as he said, it's the part that borders the Sudan, not the part that borders the Mediterranean, which will come in very important in the future part of this debate.
Go ahead.
But let's get back to the subject. Okay. Now this king, okay, he came from the southern part of Egypt that borders the Sudan. Okay. Even if you go to that part of Egypt today, the people are still black.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
When you go to even when you go to northern Sudan, okay, there are two different types of Sudan is divided as well. You have northern Sudan, which is from the first cataract all the way down to the modern day city of Khartoum. Okay. And then you go further south, you have southern Sudan. Okay, which is the capital is called Juba. Okay. The people in southern Sudan.
Okay, so again, everything that he's saying is so important. There's 3 areas, and of course there's different cataracts on it, but let's just go with modern world. There's 3 areas of Sudan. There's northern Sudan, there's the center of Sudan, and the South Sudan, and all 3 of these areas have different people living today. And these people are mixed with Middle Eastern people, the ones in the north of Sudan, but even there, they're still pretty dark compared to people living in Egypt, even though they're mixed. And so this mixed idea of Egypt, like, oh, they're mixed, therefore they're going to be light skinned, it falls to the side. And if you notice, the people in Nubia who are sometimes depicted as very, very black, sometimes they're depicted, this has to go down to symbolism and all of that. But let's not even go into that. This is the poor part. And like I said, they're resorting to jokes because in the beginning they were being serious. They realized they're out of their depth, so now they have to resort to playing around. But remember that this is a victory.
Are jet black, okay? And they look more like your people, or they look more like your Nubians that are shown on the tombs. Okay. They look more like the Nubians that are shown on the tombs, and the people of northern Sudan look a lot like the ancient Egyptians. Okay. So,
may I ask you a question, Radio? Someone donated $20 here. Thank you very much. He says, Radio 1, why is it only African Americans that support these Kang's theories in large numbers? Why don't you see these claims made by other Africans or the current Egyptians?
So we will allow him to answer this question, but let's just get out of the way. There's Africans who believe the ancient Egyptians were African, and there's there's Egyptians who believe this as well. We've literally talked about a few on here before, and then there's Europeans who believe it. That's the funny part. It's like this is why I laugh when they say it's Afrocentrism or whatever, because this pure belief, this one-sided belief, has got nothing to do with what group you're in. People of all kinds, there are racists, by the way, who believe this. There are people who are 100% racist, but they still believe that the ancient Egyptians were black. Some of them believe they were mixed, right? But then they go, because they're racist and they want an ethno state, they go, I'm not talking about ancient Egypt because ancient Egypt was a mixed society and it doesn't represent what I want. And this is the problem. This is the weird thing about it, is they always boil it down to one group. And also, I would say that that would be strange if only Americans were claiming it. That would be strange, but it's not. That's not what's happening at all. Also, not only is it not happening, there's a whole, if you go on Wikipedia and look at the whole race debate thing and go see, you can see the people there. There's a whole bunch of people. There's white people, there's all kinds of people who are debating back and forth. And it's not just, oh, black people, they're debating it because they want them to be black because they're black and they want to set things right. I don't even get into that part of it because it's not about setting anything right in terms of like making people believe. Because even if every single Egyptian was a white person, it wouldn't mean anything necessarily about black people today. But it's more about the reality that they use that fake history of making them white people to try and downplay Africans today.
Why is it only
first of all, this "we was kings" nonsense was not started by us. Okay, that was started by you silly white supremacists. Okay, come up.
I thought it was Tariq Nasheed that started that, though.
Yeah, we was kings and shit.
No, Tariq Nasheed never said that.
Well, you said
Okay,
kings,
Black
but it's not
so-
like kings. So
I believe it was the Black Israelites that started that kind of a
The We Was
mentality.
King memes is
So of course you can see here that you're dealing with racist agendas going on right now. But I want to just break down. So this word that they're using, this phrase that we something something kings, that was invented by 4chaners and people like that to try and mock black people and the way they speak in America. Of course, you know, all of the people who are everywhere, they have their own accent, blah, 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 blah. And these guys are trying to exaggerate it to make it sound like it's an American. It goes back to the American thing. And then, of course, they want to credit Tariq Nasheed, who did not invent it. And then they want to say it's Hebrew Israelites. They did not invent it. It was a bunch of racist white people who came and said that this is what we're going to say about you guys. And they did it just to laugh at black people. And I want you guys to keep that in mind. That's why I don't say the phrase, because I know that it's one of their things that, you know, these people have a weird, strange, fetishized obsession with black people, and they've got certain phrases which I will never say out loud because they're very obsessed with it.
typically attributed to 4chan as the original
Yeah, of course.
founder.
Of course, it was 4chan.
I don't think
Okay, I have no idea.
So
Who started it.
I have to ask you. So what exactly is your point with all this? Because you're going from Memphis to Thebes all the way down to Nubia, as we know it today, Sudan. Exactly what is it? Can you kind of expedite your point? Because I'm getting a history lesson and I'm kind of starting to.
Okay. Now we're gonna keep it factual.
And this is where it gets stupid. They literally derail the conversation over and over again. I mean, they were talking about gravity earlier. And then when he's still talking about Egypt, trying to make his point, because I know what his point is. His point is going to be the first peoples of Egypt were clearly from the south. They were clearly Nubian. They clearly were not Asiatic. Even if you accept the most Asiatic theories, they're clearly not Asiatic. So therefore, how can you start from where you guys start? But then he can't even get to that point because they have to challenge everything. Everything, by the way, except information that is real, and they don't know what he's talking about.
Okay, so what I'm saying is the first Egyptians came from the southern region that borders the Sudan. Okay, and even when you
And oh yeah, that's the second part of the derailment. Sitting there saying, "Oh, I'm getting a history lesson." Meanwhile, you're gonna say "okay" every time he says words, almost like some kind of wrestling heckler or something. You're like literally heckling someone who's trying to tell you something important, and then you're gonna sit here and be like, "Ooh, what?" This is the part that's very revealing about these people, like what they do and who they are. It's like. And then for like 5 seconds, they'll be like, "Oh, let's get back to the serious stuff." When? How? You're not serious. Your whole thing is not serious. Your whole demeanor is not serious. You're playing around when the guy is telling you university worth information for nothing.
read Theodore Siculus, okay, and I'm going to answer your other questions about African Americans as well.
Mhm.
When we go into Theodore Siculus, he wrote Theodore Siculus, a Greek historian that lived during the 1st century BCE. Okay, he interviewed the Egyptians and Ethiopians as well. And according to him, okay, the Ethiopians. Now I have to remind you that when Theodore Siculus was writing the last native Egyptian pharaoh, do you know who the last native Egyptian pharaoh is?
Of course, she doesn't know who the last ancient Egyptian pharaoh was. She didn't even know the first one. So obviously, she's going to start talking about Ptolemy or any of these people who are not native Egyptian. And this is the part that I'm talking about again. Even the Egyptian people as well, the historians, they say the lost native Egyptians. So they know there's a difference between people who come from elsewhere and people who come from that place. Even the Egyptians did this in their king lists. They go, no, that doesn't count because this person came from outside. But somehow it doesn't matter when it comes to genetics. Any DNA you find from Egypt, that's the funny part. The one that's recent, they literally say that guy must have come from Mesopotamia somewhere in his life, and then they go, it's a sign of ancient Egyptian. You just said he came from elsewhere. There were already people in Egypt at the time, right? So if there were people in Egypt at the time and this person came from outside and shows signs of coming from the outside, he doesn't represent the native population, right?
Are we talking? We're not talking about the 31st dynasty to Ptolemy. We're not talking about that dynasty. We're
No.
talking about, I believe, was it the 27th, the 28th? I don't know. You get them so muddled and confused because there have been so.
It's actually in Nectanebo, and you don't get them confused because those people don't even have ancient Egyptian names. Nectanebo, who is the last native pharaoh of Egypt, is not confusable. This whole, oh, you get the dynasties confused. They're literally numbered. Like they're not very easy to confuse, except of course if you're reading and you're trying to figure out the answer by looking it up while somebody's telling you something. Which I'm glad, by the way, this guy is now asking her questions, because it shows that she has no idea what she's talking about again. But I think a question he should have asked her is, what does native mean in this context? Why do they call Nectanebo the last native pharaoh of Egypt? What does that mean? If everybody's Asiatic and there's been movement back and forth between these places, what does last native even mean?
Many invasion events, both Egypt being invaded and then being the invaders throughout history. It's kind of hard to keep it all together. For instance, did you know that in the 12th dynasty they actually invaded Nubia as well, or Sudan?
Stalling tactics. Answer the question. Who was the last pharaoh of Egypt? Last native pharaoh of Egypt?
As you've mentioned. So
yes, I'm aware of that. But that invasion only reached the second cataract. It didn't go far south and down
okay,
to
they
the
still
fourth
invaded
cataract.
it. So what I'm trying to get at.
So let me just tell you what just happened, because this is so hilarious. So she said you get these things all muddled up. For example, did you know that in the 12th dynasty, the Nubians got invaded as well? And he said, yeah, but they only reached the 12th cataract. It didn't go that deep. And here's the thing. He said that immediately. No research. She went and looked it up. And then when she saw it, she's like, oh, I know what I'm going to do. Since he's going to ask me a question of like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, I'm going to ask him a question about a random dynasty. And there's no way he could figure it out. That's why she said you get them muddled up. But as soon as he answered the question, she was like, oops, got to move on to the next thing. And this is what I'm talking about, armed with knowledge. Armed with knowledge. He's not disagreeing with information. He's just armed with it. It's just when you go this deep, you have to accept certain things. But they haven't gone deep at all.
Here is just because you had foreign rule at one given time and then current rule doesn't mean that these people completely remain separate throughout the rest of history. No, of course not. Especially when you have invasion events, the populations tend to mingle with each other, if you get my.
So notice the eyes, by the way. By the way, she's going to use humor, which is a distraction, but notice the eyes. So the camera is right in front of her. This is why she keeps looking at the camera. But then she keeps looking at the side, which is fine. But when you lock into the side, it means that her computer is over there, which means she's doing the research right now. Which I don't even have a problem with that. She could say, give me like 1 minute to look it up. But don't do the thing of like, I don't know the answer. Let me stall.
Drift, sexy time, the ding dong. They engage in coitus, which produces mixed children, which become the next population that predominantly populates that area. And this is just as what has happened in Egypt. I'm sure you would agree, correct?
Well, that's a perfect answer to the question, who was the last pharaoh of Egypt? Just say you don't know. Don't give us this long, nonsensical, what the hell was that? And of course, the other guy, the French guy, is like nodding. He has no idea. He lost the plot a long time ago.
Well, first of all, the ancient Egyptians, before the 26th dynasty, they had their borders closed. Okay, they did not let foreigners into Egypt unless they were coming in as slaves.
Which
or
dynasty?
The 26th dynasty.
26th
okay,
dynasty.
Which is
So, for those of you that don't know, the 26th dynasty, there was a policy that was made by the pharaoh who decided that they're going to close the borders of Egypt down. Now, the reason why I never bring this up is because it wasn't taken that seriously. There was clearly people coming in from the outside and all of that. But that's a conversation for another day. But what's important is she has no idea, again, what he's talking about. And also, by the time it was closed, there's already people from all kinds of the world who had entered the area, but she has no idea what he's talking about. She's going to mention something generally about the subject, which tells you that she has no idea. And notice how, again, when he says something important, has to derail the conversation. He was about to say something so important.
which was the Saiti dynasty. Okay, the dynasty of Sais. Okay, now according to historical record, okay, people such as the Greeks, okay, and people from the Mediterranean, they were not allowed to come into Egypt freely, before this time, okay, because the pharaohs, they had their borders closed, and and unless foreigners were coming in as slaves or servants, they were not allowed into Egypt.
Okay.
So we're dealing with we are dealing with a society, okay, that like when you look at Black Panther, okay, I just seen that movie, okay, as it was in Wakanda, they did not allow outsiders into their empire. Same the same with Egypt, okay. On the northern part of Egypt, okay, it was bordered by the Sinai Desert. That was their northern border. They had fortresses there. They did not allow anybody to come into Egypt. And on the west.
So what he's saying right here is absolutely true. So in the Sinai or the Sinai areas of Egypt, there is a natural block in that area that stopped people from coming in. Now, obviously, it's hard to concentrate because these guys are like laughing and snickering and being ridiculous by things. This guy's saying serious things again, and they're just laughing and snickering and saying "okay" the whole time because they have no idea. They're out of their depth. They signed up for this debate and they have no idea what they're talking about.
The West, it was Libya on the southern, and it had the first cataract. Okay, but now, but the point is, we are not okay. That's not a debate here. I mean, that's not the topic of who was in Egypt. Okay, many races were in Egypt.
So you're talking about the 26th.
Just real fast, I want to say, Radio, people are loving you. Josh Hill threw $10 to say this guy needs to become a permanent member of the show. So people are really liking what you're saying, dude. So then go ahead, Weibo.
So you mentioned the 26th dynasty, how they didn't let a lot of people in, and that was because there was a great deal of opposition on all sides from the Assyrians and various other.
No. I'm saying the opposite.
So while he was talking about it, she Googled it and she was about to say some stuff which was slightly inaccurate. And obviously he saved her by jumping in. He should be a little bit more patient. Let her, I don't want to use that phrase because it's going to get me removed from YouTube, but he should have let her say the wrong thing for long enough so that she can't fix it later. But earlier she said, what dynasty? She didn't even know what he was talking about. And then now she's, all of a sudden she can name the exact policy and why. Come on, stop.
I'm saying that it was during the 26th dynasty when the Greeks started to come in. But before that, they were not allowed in unless they were coming in as slaves.
Well, the Greeks were allowed in because they were the mercenaries that kept the Babylonians out for the Egyptians. So I'm wondering, does that mean that their descendants don't count? Or like, what exactly is your argument here? Is it that just because there was a mixture at some point during whatever migration or, conflict event that occurred throughout history, does that mean that the descendants of those people no longer count as Egyptians or native Egyptians by any measure? Or what exactly is your argument here? Because it's very unclear to me.
Well, okay, now when we deal with different times in history, okay, we have different types of Egyptians. Okay. So you can we go way back. Okay, before the
like, share, subscribe if you want to see part 2. Let's try to see if we can get this video to a good amount of views or a good amount of likes. Thank you very much. There will be a part 2.